You are listening to the Strong as a Working Mom podcast, episode number 83. If the idea of discipline sounds rigid or restrictive to you, let me help you shake that up. Welcome to the Strong as a Working Mom podcast. If you're balancing career, family, wellness, and some days sanity, you are in the right place. This is where high-achieving, busy working moms get the tools they need to eat, move, and think. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Let's do this. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? We are going to talk about discipline today. Honestly, of the many concepts that I work on with clients in my coaching, I realize that this is probably one of my most favorites, really. I'm coming clean and admitting just how nerdy I am, but I really do love to talk about and pick apart discipline. And this is largely because I think that discipline gets a bad rap. So some of you have flat out told me that you view discipline as restrictive, boring, limiting, rigid, or just straight up no fun. And it makes total sense that if you see discipline that way, if you see it as something that limits you, or if you see being disciplined as being boring, then you're not going to feel compelled to build it. You're not going to feel inspired to flex that muscle and practice discipline. But this is where I can help you see it differently. I want to help you see that creating discipline in your life, whether that's related to your diet, your exercise, your spending habits, your career, whatever it is, I want to help you see that having discipline is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself, really. My hope is that you walk away from this episode seeing discipline as something to be desired because it really does give you freedom. And I'll explain how all that works in just a few minutes. And there's a reason I'm choosing this time of year to talk about this. So early on in the new year is a great time to talk about discipline. And really, in my world, any time is a good time to talk about it. But that's especially the case while it's still January. So for many of you, you may be on your fourth week of a new habit. You may have used January 1 as the official start line of a new habit like eating healthier or starting an exercise routine or changing up your career. And now we're nearly 4 weeks in. And if holding up your new habits has gotten a little harder for you, which is totally normal, by the way, then you'll definitely want to keep listening. So here's what I most commonly see happen. When you start a new habit, you've got both motivation and novelty working in your favor, like we talked about last week. Those two things together, novelty plus a hefty dose of motivation after coming off the holidays, those are often enough to get you started. But it's not enough to sustain you because both motivation and novelty fade. And then for too many of you, you start to call on willpower to help you out. So you know this already, but let me remind you, willpower is unreliable. It's like the friend you would go to fun parties with, but would never depend on to pick you up from the airport because you're not sure if she'll show up. So remember what willpower is. If you look it up, you'll find that willpower is the control you exert to restrain impulses. Willpower is your ability to resist urges. But resisting urges, as I have said numerous times before, that takes a boatload of energy from your brain to do. And your brain does not like to work that hard. So think about it. Think about a time you relied on willpower to help you out. Maybe you decided to cut back on the amount of processed snacks you eat during the day. Because maybe after doing some self-monitoring and picking up patterns, you realize that you tend to snack way too much. And those snacks tend to be things like candy or cookies or random things in the break room. And you want to zone in and work on that habit. And then you had a rough day. You're running behind at work. You still got a few hours left before you leave. And you walk into the break room only to be confronted with a box of cookies. So mind you, you have no idea how long those cookies have been sitting there, but they are there looking at you. And now you've got a decision to make. And if you're relying on willpower to get you through, you may very well end up with cookie crumbs all over your shirt because willpower may or may not be available to you in that moment. So remember that when emotion is high, cognition is low. So what that means is when you're stressed, sad, upset, frustrated, irritated, or name your negative emotion, when that emotion is high, your cognition or your ability to think rationally is low. And that is when willpower ghosts you and you end up with a 2-day-old cookie in your mouth that you really didn't want in the first place. So when you combine stress plus decision fatigue, willpower does not have much of a chance at helping you. When you're already stressed, your brain is likely not going to be able to supply you with energy in the form of willpower to say no to the cookies at work. And that is where you really need discipline to help you out. So to keep this very simple, I think of it this way. Discipline is making your decision ahead of time. Willpower is making your decision in the heat of the moment. And you know how that typically turns out, right? So if you've ever found yourself saying, I just need more willpower, or if the idea of discipline does not appeal to you because you think it's boring, limiting, or rigid, let's pull this apart. I'm going to help you see why discipline is essential. Beyond that, I'm going to help you see how having discipline really does give you freedom and why it is one of the key pieces to growing and evolving into your next best version. All right, so let's go. So first, let's get some clarity on what exactly discipline is. So we're all operating under the same definition as we talk through this. So if you're to look it up, you'll find all kinds of definitions. But for our purposes, especially relating to habits, you can think of discipline as a controlled way of behaving. Pretty simple. A controlled way of behaving or carrying yourself. Now, here's the other side of discipline that I want you to think about. This is my most favorite way of seeing discipline. So discipline, very simply, is doing what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to, even though you don't want to. And that last piece, even though you don't want to, that piece is key. So here's why. It is one thing to make a plan. I will get up at 5:30 a.m. and do a Peloton ride. But it is another thing entirely when 5:30 rolls around and your alarm goes off. Then you've got a decision. Get out of your warm, fuzzy bed or turn the alarm off and roll over. So having discipline takes into account that as a human, you're probably not going to want to get out of your warm and cozy bed. You are very likely not going to want to do what you said you were going to do. But you do it anyway. You made the plan and then you follow the plan, even if you don't feel like it. That is discipline. And that's exactly why you made the plan in the first place, because you knew you weren't going to want to do it, but you do it anyway. All right. So now, while we have that operating definition, let's add to it, and we're going to talk about some of the key features of discipline. So what makes a person disciplined? So first, in order to be a disciplined person, the regulating of your behavior is voluntary. And I should be clear here, I'm talking about self-discipline, okay? This is something that you're taking on yourself. Whatever habit you're taking on and wherever it is you're choosing to create discipline in your life, you are doing it on your own accord. Okay, that part, that's critical. When you choose to practice self-discipline, you're doing it on your own free will and of your own volition. So as an example, if you choose to start exercise, and you know this already, but no one is going to do the work for you. You recognize that the exercise, it is ultimately on you. It's your work, your results. And honestly, that's one of my most favorite things about exercise. No one can run the laps or lift the weights for you. It's all you. Now, this is not to say that you can't create accountability by having a workout partner that you meet at 5:30, or that you have a personal trainer you've paid to take you through workout routines, or you join a running group. You can still do all of those things and have discipline, because at the end of the day, it's on you to show up. It's on you to get out of bed and schlep yourself to the gym and meet your workout buddy or your trainer. It's up to you to get downstairs and do your Peloton ride while everyone else in your house is still sleeping. No one is going to force you to do it. And that's exactly the point. To be self-disciplined means you do the work voluntarily. You do it willingly. All right. So here's another key feature of discipline. And this is a key take home here. You can think of discipline as choosing what you'll give up. Now, before you balk at that idea, let me explain it a little more with an example. So let's say you've made a goal to improve your eating. Maybe you realize that you eat too much fast food, restaurant food, takeout, and it's not helping you with your goals, so you decide to change that up. So by nature of practicing discipline, you decide to give up having dinner out every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. And instead, you choose to eat out at most once in a weekend. Do you see that? You are choosing to give up multiple meals out because you know that eating at home and making your own meals with veggies and lean protein will help you lose weight, feel less bloated, and feel better overall. And you make that choice willingly. You choose it. No one is forcing you to do anything here. You choose what to give up when you create discipline for yourself. And it feels really, really good to do that. It's not only empowering, but that is self-mastery right there. All right. Another feature of being disciplined is that you see the value of your behavior for the delayed gratification that it will bring you. This is huge. So in our world and in the culture and society that we live in, and also thanks to very fancy marketing tactics you see all over TV and social media, we are sold instant gratification over and over again. Feel tired? Drink this drink and wake up. Feel sad? Eat this cookie or this cake and feel better. Feel frumpy? Buy this outfit and look better. We have been totally duped into believing that instant gratification will bring us happiness. But that is just bogus. Instant gratification is a temporary, fake happiness that ultimately leaves you worse off than how you started. But we often don't see it or feel it until after the fact. Because drinking the drink when you're tired is not a substitute for going to bed earlier. Eating the cookie when you feel sad, that is not a substitute for processing your emotions. Instant gratification is not a long-term fix. And to illustrate this point, I found this quote somewhere and I scribbled it on a piece of paper because it was so good and it sums up this concept of instant versus delayed gratification so well that I wanted to share. And that quote is, "It's fun while it goes down, but the aftertaste is bitter." And that is instant gratification right there. That's it. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last. And then you often end up feeling worse afterwards. It's not worth it. So think about it. Imagine you're trying to lose weight and you're out to dinner with friends. You've decided ahead of time that you're going to treat yourself by having a really awesome dessert. And because of that, you're skipping alcohol, the bread basket, and all the appetizers. But then you're at the table and your friends pass around the bread basket and you think it looks so delicious and it's warm. And you decide, well, hey, one piece, that's no big deal. I'll eat less bread tomorrow. And I use this as an example because some of you have done exactly this. You bargain with yourself that since you ate more of something today than you planned, you'll bargain by eating less of it tomorrow. And then because you had the bread, you say, forget it, I've already messed this up, so I may as well go all in. And then you help yourself to the appetizers that are sitting on the table. And then you decide, well, why not? And have a glass of wine just like everyone else is having. And then you have your meal and you follow it up with the dessert that you planned. And there's still some wine left in the bottle, so you just have half a glass just because. So what started as a plan to have dinner and dessert ended up with bread, appetizers, drinks, and dessert. All of it. And this is where the instant gratification of all the things at dinner won out over the decision you made ahead of time. And then think of how it feels when you're heading home. It doesn't feel good. Physically, you probably don't feel great from all the food and alcohol you just had, but even worse, you didn't follow through. I don't know about you, but I generally don't feel awesome when I make a plan and I don't stick to it. I don't feel great when I let the here and now become more flashy than what I'm working on for the future. But that's what happens when you choose instant over delayed gratification. When you choose to practice discipline, you look beyond the decision that is immediately in front of you and you think about the long-term outcome. You think about what happens later. Discipline calls in your ability to prioritize delayed gratification over the instant gratification that often shoots you in the foot. Okay, so next, another essential feature of discipline in relation to our habits is that it breeds consistency. So when I think of consistency, I think of three things: behavior, repetition, and frequency. So let's talk about this for a minute. So first, in order to build consistency, you have to do the behavior, right? You actually have to do the thing. So as an example, if you want to look strong, feel strong, and have muscle, you've got to hit the weights. You have to pick up and put down heavy stuff, okay? I know they may sound basic, but if you want muscle, you've got to lift weights. So there's your behavior. And then you need to repeat the behavior. So that's putting in your reps. Going to the gym once or twice for 1 month and then stopping, that's not going to be enough. I've written multiple podcasts about building muscle, and if you want to be successful, plan for months or really like years of regular weight training. So that means lifting weights a few times a week, like at least 2 serious heavy-duty strength training sessions per week, but ideally more like 3 or 4 sessions per week, week after week. And that's the key. You keep showing up at the gym week after week, putting in your reps and doing your workouts, even when you don't feel like it. And then last, you repeat the behavior with enough frequency so that you see an impact. Showing up to the gym 20 days in January, then 10 days in February, then 5 days in March, that's not going to cut it. Frequency means you do your workouts and you do them often within a particular time frame. So when you lift weights 4 days a week, every week for 12 straight months, you will see a very different physique than if you train 4 days a week, 1 week, no days the following week, 1 day the following week, and so on. The behavior has to be repeated with enough frequency that it makes a difference. So again, consistency is a combination of the behavior itself plus repetition plus frequency. And you need all three of those in order for something to become a habit. And when you practice discipline, you do all three of those things. Okay? All right, next. Another feature of being disciplined means you accept personal responsibility for yourself and your behaviors. So very simply, it means you acknowledge the consequences of your choices, both the ones that help you and the ones that don't. And you practice holding yourself accountable to a certain standard of behavior. So there's that word again, standard. I know we talked about it last week, but I think standards and discipline go together so nicely, it's worth mentioning again briefly here. When you practice discipline, you practice living up to the standards you've set for yourself. As in, I do not snack in between meals. There's your standard. And then you practice discipline in order to live into that standard. So when you're at home and your kid pulls out a bag of popcorn or trail mix because he's 9 and growing like a weed and never seems to be full, speaking from experience here, even though he's having a snack, you don't join him because you decided in advance that your standard is not to snack between meals. So you skip the popcorn. And now you're flexing your personal responsibility and practicing discipline by choosing not to have the snack. Because you know that once you start with 1 handful of popcorn, it leads to 2, and then 3, and then you have a scoop of trail mix too, and then a few pieces of cheese. And before you know it, you've eaten the equivalent of a dinner before you've even sat down to dinner. This happens all the time. But practicing discipline will help you avoid this. Once you decide your standard, then you accept responsibility for both the instances that you do and the instances that you don't follow through on it. And all this means is that every opportunity you have to snack is an opportunity to practice discipline and follow your standard. It's taking personal responsibility for your actions. It all goes together. Okay? All right. So now that we've talked through some of the key features of discipline, let's talk about some of the misconceptions that you might have about it. This is where I spend a lot of time working with my clients because often they'll have a skewed view of what discipline really is, which makes it harder for them. So let's bust up some of these ideas, okay? So first, perfection and discipline are not one and the same. So this is essential to understand. Discipline means you make a decision in advance and you practice holding yourself to it. And by very nature of the word practice, it means you're going to mess up, okay? So in fact, that's why I think of discipline as a practice. It's a practice of behaviors and actions, repeated regularly. But it's not all or nothing. It's not perfect. It's not 100%. Because remember, there is no such thing as perfect, and perfect would be insanely boring. So at the same time, when I think of discipline, I think of practicing excellence. It's having high expectations of yourself, meaning you hold yourself to high standards, but recognize that mistakes, they are part of the process. Now, contrast that to perfection, where you have unrealistic expectations of yourself and hold yourself to an impossible standard. Perfectionism expects a flawless performance each and every time, and that is superhuman. That is not possible. And here's another big difference between discipline and perfectionism. If you're a perfectionist, your fear of failure may keep you from getting started altogether because you're worried that you're not going to be able to stick with your nutrition or exercise program. And if it's not going to be 100%, why bother? And then on top of that, for many of you, perfectionism often boils down to one misstep and you're done. You let one night of too many cookies or pieces of candy mean that you are a failure and you give up on yourself. Those are the two most common ways I see perfectionism get in your way when it comes to changing your habits. But on the flip side, discipline recognizes that you are absolutely going to mess up, but you don't let that mess up stop you from either getting started or moving forward. That is essential. Practicing discipline means that you see mistakes as part of the learning process. This is huge. So for me, discipline is much more about the process, while perfection is all about the outcome. So stick with the process, even if it's messy, okay? You will get so much bigger of a return on your investment when you focus on the process instead of the outcome, all right? Okay, next. Another place where you may get stuck is by thinking that having discipline means being rigid. And if you decide that to be true, then yeah, I can see how the idea of creating discipline would not appeal to you at all. But let me frame it this way. Discipline becomes rigidity when it becomes a detriment to you. Meaning, when your discipline gets to the degree that it gets in the way of you living a better life instead of it helping you to live a better life, then you know you've overshot it and you're probably being too rigid. So as an example, if you repeatedly decline dinner invitations out because you don't want to deal with managing yourself at a restaurant, and in turn it's negatively impacting your important relationships, then I would see that as being rigid over being disciplined. Or if you are so set on a certain workout schedule or routine that you cannot alter it when you're on vacation or out of your usual environment or with other people, and you essentially let your workout routine negatively impact your life or your schedule, then yes, I would argue that things are getting too rigid. In both instances, those are examples of being so focused that you become inflexible, and that's when your discipline has gone too far. So this one, admittedly, is a little slippery. It can be a fine line between sticking to your plan as evidence of discipline or if it's evidence of being too rigid. And as I was thinking through this podcast, I ultimately decided it depends. It really does depend on how following through on your behavior is impacting your life. If following through and practicing discipline is interfering with your daily life, or if it's interfering with your important relationships, or it's negatively impacting you in some way, then I would encourage you to evaluate critically to decide if you're being overly rigid. And this is very much personal. There is no one right answer here. The overall goal is to hit a sweet spot that balances discipline with flexibility so that you have your standards, you practice living them, but you're flexible enough to allow for occasional deviations without it becoming a big deal. Like everything, it's balance. And it may take some trial and error to determine what the line between discipline and rigid is for you. Okay? All right, next. The next big misconception around discipline is the idea that it will take away your freedom. And this could not be further from the truth. So I saved this one for last because I want to spend some time talking about this and bring it all home by declaring here and now that having discipline truly is having freedom. So I'm going to give you some examples from my own life to illustrate this, starting with nutrition. So I know I've mentioned it a number of times on the podcast, but in my family, we tend to eat most of our meals at home. We buy groceries once a week. We do meal prep of some sort on the weekends where we can fit it in. And we send our kids to school with lunches that we make at home. We eat dinner at home about 95% of the time. And pretty much every night, there is a salad. Like literally every night. Our dinners are not wild. They're not super fancy. And they are definitely not elaborate. Because who's got time for elaborate? We are generally scarfing down dinner between various sports practices and homework, so dinner is not extravagant. But the point here is we cook our own food and we eat at home the majority of the time. And that is by choice. What I eat matters to me. Not in the sense that I need fancy or fried stuff or rich, indulgent stuff that you get at a restaurant. That does not matter to me. Eating real whole foods like veggies and lean protein. That is what matters to me. So I don't buy a bunch of processed junk food at the grocery store. The bulk of the food we have at home is produce, protein, and whole grains. And I feel good about the food we eat. I don't walk away from our dinner table feeling gross or bloated or like I have a gut bomb sitting in my stomach. And that is by design. And then from an exercise perspective, if you know me at all by now, you know how I feel about exercise. I get in some form of movement every day, with lighter days too. I mix up cardio or heavy lifting. I have a structured weight training routine that I created for myself because I want to look and feel a certain way, because muscle feels good. And when triathlon training season starts, I'll be following a plan to get myself ready for a race at the end of the summer. And because fitness is important to me, I made a commitment to get it done. I get up at the crack of dawn and get my workout done while my kids are still sleeping so that by the time we get them to school, I can get on with my workday and I don't have to think about exercise anymore. And I'm not sharing all of this to say, hey, you should do this too. I'm not telling you that the lifestyle I've adopted for myself is going to work for you. But what I am saying is that in terms of my health and fitness, I lead a pretty disciplined lifestyle. My lunch has been the same for the last 4+ years. I've been eating a salad every night with dinner since 2017. My workouts get done in the 5 o'clock hour during the work week every week. And while some of you may think this sounds awful and totally limiting, I don't see it that way at all. So this is where discipline and freedom intersect. When it comes to exercise and nutrition, I feel totally free. And I feel free in multiple ways. So first, I feel free because I don't have to think about this stuff anymore. I just do it. I made my decision a long time ago that physical and mental health are priorities for me. And it's been a priority for long enough now that it's a no-brainer. It's my lifestyle and it operates in the background. It takes up less space in my brain. And it can totally be that way for you too. When you choose to practice discipline, there is freedom from brain drama. You won't have to go around in circles about whether or not to get fast food on your way home from work or go home and chop up salad. The decision is made. You drive past Qdoba and you make yourself the salads like you planned. No drama. When your friends offer you glass after glass of wine at dinner, but you don't drink on weeknights because it messes with your sleep and you feel like garbage the next day, you say no thank you. There's no back and forth. There's no mental chatter. There's no bargaining with yourself. You decided that drinking during the week doesn't work for you, and that's it. And over time, the more you do it, the more you realize it's no big deal. It's not so hard. And you feel lighter. You feel better. And the decisions get easier and easier to make and execute. Now, this isn't to say that this doesn't take work. It absolutely does. You still have to schlep yourself out of bed and do the workouts before sunrise. You still have to prep the food and actually eat it. You still have to practice saying no thank you to the wine. But again, like any habit, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And the less space these things take up in your brain. So instead of wasting loads of mental energy on what to have for dinner and how much wine to have, and should you have a piece of cake or no, you can use that mental energy for other more important decisions. Okay? All right, so let's keep going. Here is another way that discipline gives you freedom. So for me, I feel freedom because I did this on my own accord. I chose discipline. It was not put upon me. No one told me to get up early and work out. No one told me to eat a salad. No one told me to get under a squat bar or jump in the pool. I told myself. I chose health. I chose to make it a priority, and I'm passionate enough about it that it's worth it to make the choices that I do. And it feels really good to have that self-mastery in place. So remember, you always have a choice, right? When it comes to how you eat and whether and how you move your body, you always have a choice. So for me, I made the choice to be healthy. I want to be strong and I want to walk my talk and be an example for not only my family, but for my clients, past, present, and future. And to be clear, there are days that I just don't want to, especially when it comes to swimming. I've mentioned before, swimming is not my strong suit. But I get up and I go to the pool and I jump in that cold water anyway. And I do it by my own choice because the pursuit of improvement keeps me coming back for more. No one's watching me. No one's keeping tabs on me. I am keeping tabs on me. I'm not doing it for anyone else. And I encourage you to take the same approach. Take on discipline for yourself, not for your partner, not for your kids, not for your friends. Do it for yourself. Choose it on purpose. Okay. And the last way that having discipline gives me freedom is this. While I am 45 years old, and my kids love to remind me of that all the time, most days I don't feel like it. I feel pretty good. I don't feel 45. And I am insanely grateful to have the level of strength and health that I do at my age. And I am not about to let that go if I can help it. So think about it. How do you want to live your life while you're here? How do you want things to be for yourself 5, 10, 20 years from now? Do you want to be able to run around with your kids or your grandkids? Do you want to be spending time in doctor's offices? Do you want to be able to carry in your own groceries from the store? Do you want to struggle to bend over and put on your boots when it's freezing and snowing outside? It's your choice. Decide what you want for your future self and act on it now, like today. Okay? It's not too late. I don't care how old you are. It's never too late to change it up and create better habits for yourself that will give you a better quality of life. So you can look at it this way. You can see practicing discipline around your habits as controlling the controllables. You have whatever genes and predispositions that were passed down to you. Fine. But that's only part of the story. You can manage your environment. You can manage your sleep. You can manage your stress levels. You control how you eat and move. And that all adds up. And for me, that adds up to feeling, quite honestly, pretty darn good most days. So here's what I mean. By choosing not to fill myself with restaurant food, fast food, processed food, I'm controlling my controllables. By passing on the indulgence of French fries and cookies and pastries most of the time, I am creating a healthier me for the future. By engaging in the discomfort of regular exercise through cardio and strength training now, I'm building a stronger me for the future. And I'm making those choices from a place of freedom now so that I'll have freedom in my future too. And that's just it. I fully recognize I could die tomorrow, but hopefully that's not the case. And I'm lucky enough to live a long life. And while I want to be around for a long, long time, I want my one shot here on this earth to be as healthy as I can make it. I do not want to be limited by my body if I can help it. I do not want my choices later to be limited by the choices I'm making today. So that means whatever I can do to give myself health 10, 20 years from now, sign me up. I've said it before, but I would love to be an 80-year-old bodybuilder. I would love to be doing triathlons when I'm 85. And that is not going to happen if I spend my 40s and beyond eating piles of Cheetos and Oreos and sitting on my couch. Because your body keeps score. Whether you like it or not, your body keeps score. And you pay for who you become by the life you lead now. So if you want the freedom to move and play and travel and live your life to the fullest, even when you're well into the fourth quarter of your life, you've got to take care of it now. And you can absolutely do that by creating discipline. Choose what you are willing to give up. Choose what you're willing to sacrifice. Choose how you'll deny yourself. Because in reality, when you're practicing discipline, you won't see it that way. Instead, when you choose discipline and you do it willingly, you'll see that what you gain is worth so much more than what you give up. That freedom is totally worth it. When you are not powerless to candy or cookies or soda or French fries, when you are not controlled by food, when you can lift heavy stuff and run and not get breathless from simple tasks, when you're not limited by your mind or your body, that is when you've got freedom. And that is when you'll see that discipline is totally worth it. All right? If you want help with this, let's talk. When you coach with me, you'll practice creating discipline and holding yourself accountable. You will learn loads of tools and concepts to make discipline easier, and I'll support you all the way. Check out my website. Go to www.carriehollandmd.com/contact. Tell me where you want more discipline in your life, and let's get to work. All right? Thank you for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. If you like what you've been hearing, please review the show. I would love to get your feedback and ideas. Your suggestions have inspired episodes and will help me make the show better for you. And share this podcast with a friend. Text a show link, share a screenshot, or post a link to the show on your social media. And be sure to tag me at Carrie Holland MD on either Instagram or Facebook so I can follow along and engage with you. This is how we get the word out to other working moms who want to feel strong inside and out. If you know someone who wants to feel better or eat and move differently, but she is too tired or too busy, it is time to change things up. And you know, making that change starts with how you think. And that is what we do here on the Strong as a Working Mom podcast. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Strong as a Working Mom. If you want more information on how to eat, move, and think so you can live in the body you want with the mind to match, visit me at carriehollandmd.com.